last week's public hearing on the Office of Equity, which was, if you didn't have an opportunity to watch it or be present at that hearing, there was a beautiful articulation from a broad range of community about supporting an equity initiative in the city of Portland. The stories were wonderful and powerful, and the consensus was really beautiful to uphold this work and bring it to our fair city here in Portland. Following that testimony, there was a request from the council to, from my own personal perspective too, and I think as a commission we've talked about this up to this point as well, about the keeping two separate entities, the Human Rights Commission and the Office of Equity. How to maximize those resources to move forward and align and expand our ability as a Human Rights Commission to support the work of an equity initiative. And so a consolidation of the two offices is what is attempted in the draft language that's presented for us to study here today. Commissioner Fritz and Mayor Adams are here to answer our questions, or would you like to present some context or information around that right now? But please feel free to come up and join the table as well. And also, I just wanted to share too that Alan has done a tremendous amount of work of setting some meetings with Commissioner Leonard and representative from Dan Saltzman's office, and really trying to, in a short amount of time, to be able to move this work forward and try to come to some consensus between the two entities. And so here's where we sit with this product so far. So Alan will be providing some context around that as well.
Thanks, Linda. And you, I think, covered most of the introductory pieces I want to talk about. Actually, I'm a pretty visual person, so I wanted to go through for our group to get, we've talked about a lot of different things, so I wanted to give us a sense of how those pieces lay out in this context. So for me, I thought I would use these big chart packs. So I think right now, you know, we're faced with sort of two short-term or immediate options. And I think the way Donita is characterizing this good. There's this one that we might talk about as a two-office option, and one that we talk about as a one-office option. What you see reflected in the ordinance language, draft ordinance language, is this one-office option. The two-office options are some of the options that we've talked about before, about kind of where we came from, what the intentions were for forming the Human Rights Commission in the past. Most of the other things that we've talked about as a group kind of fit in a long-term kind of other. So I don't know that we should confuse all those issues together. You know, so over here we've got some stuff going on with the Charter Commission. You know, we've talked about 501c3. We've talked about some of those different kinds of options. You know, models like ONI or RAC. And I don't think that options like this or this are mutually exclusive from the kinds of options that are immediately in front of us. So that's really the piece that I want to be clear about, that where our discussion lies is really over here with these items. These items tend to be a little bit separate from the issues we're faced with here. These are the ones that have been in front of us, that we're dealing with, and are prompted by the ordinance for the Office of Equity having come forward last week. Thank you. So that's really the context I had. As Anita said, we've been spending the last week since the request came from council to get this thing figured out. That's what we've been spending our time doing. And I hope you've had a chance to read the document and formulate some thoughts, ideas, and questions. And we appreciate having Commissioner Fritz and the Mayor here to help us with this discussion.
Fry, and thank you, Commissioners, for inviting us to be with you today, and for all the work that has been done over the past many years, as well as the past many months since the Mayor announced the Equity Initiative in February at the State of the City speech. We've had a creation committee, which Alan and Damon have been sitting in on to scope out, knowing that we have problems with equity, particularly with race and ethnicity and people with disabilities in Portland. What is it that we can do differently? How are we going to approach it differently in order to get more successful outcomes? So to be clear, the ordinance that was before council last week did not include merging to becoming one office. My intent, as stated in the hearing and before, had been to have, I thought that more time for you and I and the Mayor to have more discussion about which directions you would like to go, including some of these options that was outlined, could have been very helpful, and that was what my plan had been and why I didn't come to you last month or the previous months. I was thinking that we would have more time to figure that out. Four members of the council were very clear last week that they wanted this done as part of the equity ordinance. So the Mayor graciously gave us a little more time than 1 week, which would have been the second reading of the ordinance, to get to September 21st, is that will be the next reading on an amended ordinance. So again, thank you to Alan and Denise and Damon for helping to craft the ordinance that we have before you. I apologize that I neglected to send this morning the electronic copy. But we have the paper copies, and there are other copies, at least one. Does anybody in the audience still need a copy of what's being discussed? Sir, can you see here?
Exhibit C.
Who has that small copies of it? It's the title of it, and this is in response to input from your leaders. Create the Office of Equity and Human Rights, provide for staffing of Human Rights Commission and Portland Commission on These Bills, and by the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and establish the council's commitments and approve the initial work plan. So the Mayor and I thought it would be most helpful is if you just walk through the ordinance. We can take questions as we go through, or at the end, whichever would better. And the Mayor has been working for the last 3 years on the Portland plan, which is really the foundation and where this started growing. That in all the work on the Portland plan, in all the community outreach that has been done with multiple different communities, we heard over and over again that equity is a core problem in Portland and that we need to address it in a much more systemic, thoughtful, and well-designed way than has been done in the past. There's been many good-hearted efforts to address the racial and ethnic and other disparities in Portland, and yet the communities of color study, the state of Black Oregon, your own research, our own experience tells us that we haven't made the progress that we need to be, and we aren't the city that many of us would like to be. So that's the foundation. There's a lot of research gone into where we are today.
Well, I too want to Chair Fry and members of the Commission, I too want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. This is my second time before the Commission. And I think Commissioner Fritz said it well, but to just amplify a little bit with a sort of a personal take on it, as someone who's been around city government for going on 2 decades, and in the intervening time since the original Office of Human Rights was set up, we have had a new census and the new research that you've done, and new research from the Urban League and from the Coalition for Communities of Color, and the Portland Plan. And so all that provides sort of foundation for knowing better what the problem is, the extent of the problem, the trends of the problem. And when that information came forward for me, it just showed that collectively, and again, as someone who's been around a long time, I share a lot of that sort of collective history and part of a lot of that collective efforts. That collectively, what we're doing now is not enough, and that includes your mayor. So, Portland Plan is focused, the entire lens, is equity.
being proposed in the Office of now Equity and Human Rights. What we have before us is essentially what has been worked on for several months, in putting together the Office of Equity structure, and then adding in from the Office of Human Relations work, the pieces that refer to your needed existence and your staffing and purpose. So carrying over the previous language as much as possible. I think it's important. The first sections, 1 and 2, are what the Portland Plan currently says. It was very interesting that in our public comment period for 2 weeks, and it was out before the 31st, most of the comments were change the language of this. And yet this just states what's in the current draft of the Portland Plan. So if you don't agree with 1 and 2, the Portland Plan won't be adopted until early next year, and so there'll be opportunities to change this language. Whatever is adopted in the Portland Plan will be the language that defines equity. That was one of the biggest questions starting in February. What do you mean by equity? And I actually think that having that discussion is really helpful because it starts people of us thinking. Each of us probably has a different definition, or at least a different concept of how to move forward to achieve it. So that's 1 and 2. Human rights, will be attaching the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So again, it gets it in front of the board audience and emphasizes the authority for your work. Number 4 is a statement of the council wants to make, and so is 5. So that the Human Rights Commission is an essential component of council's commitment to human rights and equity, and that is stated right up front, that we are committed to your existence and importance. And turning the page onto page 2, we were not initially going to put commission and disability in with this office, but with the direction from the council to merge and partner the Office of Human Relations working with the Human Rights Commission with the Office of Equity, it seems important and an opportunity to note that the Commission on Disability wants to be part of the Office of Equity and will eventually get staffing from it also. So that's where number 6 came. Any questions so far?
So part of the reason, just one person's take and mine are not definitive is, I think that the Declaration of Human Rights is very complementary to the emerging and draft aspirational statement for equity. The UN Declaration talks about the elimination of barriers, elimination of biases and such, which I think is essential and very realistic in order to get to the equity vision in the Portland Plan. So I think the two together strengthens each.
So moving on to page 2, number 7, letters A through F are the data that supports it. Those have not been changed since the ordinance last week. They're essentially the foundation for why we believe this is important work and what the data we're basing it on. And then
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is it standard to include that kind of information in an ordinance?
Yes.
Because it doesn't direct anything, it just describes something.
It's what they call the findings. So you have the factual basis and then it directs later on in the ordinance. But it's sometimes useful for legislative intent or to refer back to. It certainly highlights